Breaking news in college football. The SEC is not as good as ESPN told you it was. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Tennessee would go 7-5 in the Big 12. Happy Sunday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. I was going to record at the conclusion of Tennessee and Ohio State and break down what we saw today, but it was total chaos from a fan response perspective and complete and utter boredom in the Tennessee-Ohio State game to the point that I have it paused behind me, and the score at the time of recording, 42-10 in the fourth quarter. The mighty SEC, the league that Lane Kiffin told you all day long should have Ole Miss or Alabama or South Carolina in, and having Indiana or SMU is a complete waste. That same league got its doors blown off by an Ohio State team whose, checks notes, let's see, last game was a loss to putrid Michigan. But the SEC is so high and mighty, the SEC is so good at football that you have to sit there and believe that that league that is cocky, that can talk a bigger game than it can play, is somehow the god of college football when it's not the case. Aaron Torres tweets this. I'd add, this is the team everyone is arguing deserved to be in the playoff. Alabama, 1-3 in the SEC in road games, and lost 24-3 to 6-6 Oklahoma. Uh-oh. Doug Lesmerises says, gotta admit, the offensive stats are pretty embarrassing. He says 3 points, 3 interceptions, only 4.1 yards per play. This is mostly talking about that SMU game. 3 points, 3 interceptions, 4.1 yards per play, 2.3 yards per rush. Oh no. Those were Alabama stats in the 28-3 loss to Oklahoma. Oh, that doesn't fit the narrative, does it? How about this? Indiana went 11-1 in convincing fashion against a terrible schedule, was rewarded with a 10 seed in the playoff, a road game against a better 11-1 team, and got smoked. That is perfectly acceptable in a playoff system where there are 12 teams. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. 16 of the prior 30 college football playoff games that have been played were blowouts prior to this season. And now all of a sudden, all day long, the SEC. The SEC. So there were never blowouts, but now there are because we didn't have enough SEC teams here. And then what happens last night between Ohio State and Tennessee? A complete and utter blowout. I want to sit there for a second because Kirk Herbstreit said on the broadcast, this is a Tennessee team that is usually dominating. Their defense dominates. They dominate the line of scrimmage. That's weird, Herbie. They do what in SEC play? And then they couldn't do it last night against an Ohio State team that lost to Michigan? I'm confused. You told me this is a team that's dominated the SEC in the most physical portion of football, the line of scrimmage, the trenches. But now they're getting their butts whipped? And that's somehow not an indictment on the Southeastern Conference? Make it make sense. Shehan Jayaracha says, so to be clear, we should restructure the entire postseason so we can let worse SEC teams than this in. That's what you begged for all day? Lane Kiffin went from tweeting up a storm about how the Southeastern Conference got screwed over to radio silence. Sitting there going, oops. Watching his former Tennessee Volunteers team get its brakes beat off against Ohio State. And while Texas is in the conversation too, you're going, well, yeah, but bring up Texas. Clemson pretty much ate through the Texas defense for a good portion of this game. Yeah, the offense was there, but also Quinn Ewers, turnover machine. For every epic play he makes another that's stupid, asinine, dumb. And there are Texas fans this entire season who have said, I don't know if we can trust Quinn Ewers, man. We might have to go to Arch Manning. I have heard ad nauseum on social media. Texas fans saying, oh, well, we got to include Arch Manning because, Quinn Ewers isn't as dynamic and we need to appease Manning and it would make Texas better overall. And sure enough, Arch Manning gets snaps because Quinn Ewers doesn't have the full and complete trust of the fan base. The coaching staff too. And this is the Texas we're supposed to be scared of. This is the SEC we're supposed to be scared of. Now it is Texas and Georgia. You're down to two. And had you gotten Alabama in, had you gotten South Carolina or Ole Miss in, that's that same Alabama team that lost to Vanderbilt, dog. I tried to say it. This is a Tennessee team that, can I paint you a picture from a Big 12 perspective? Our worst team, I'm talking dog water, Oklahoma State, who had to fire everybody who wasn't their head coach, then restructure his contract so he gives over $1 million to assistants and players at NIL. That same team 0-9 in Big 12 play. Winless. Beat a middle-of-the-pack SEC school that's headed to a bowl game in Arkansas. But this big bad league that's so good harbors that same Arkansas team that beat Tennessee, held them below 20 points. And you want to tell me that this conference, what it is this propaganda machine that has created a strength of schedule metric that's completely skewed. Yeah, well, when they got the win against LSU was ranked. Well, they're not now. They're 7-5. Yeah, but from a strength of schedule standpoint, we know that LSU is better than Kansas State, for example. Are they? We play hypotheticals over and over and over for a league that wants you to think that it's better than everybody else. And the only reason they want you to think that is so that they can profit more money. And the only reason the national pundits from On3 and from Rivals and from ESPN will continue to push that narrative is because guess what? I don't even, you can, on your phone now, you can double click and it'll show your face. It'll show you your wallet. That's what it is. They want to double click their phone, face scan. Oh, look, my debit card. Because I said nice things about the SEC today into a microphone because I'm a sellout, because I'm a schmuck. I can double tap, face, debit card, click, pay, and not have to worry about it. You sell out. And now that creates a flywheel, this little machine, where I'm old enough to remember Pat Ford tweeted this, 59-20, Oregon over Florida State. 38-0, Alabama over Michigan State. Clemson 31, Ohio State 0. Clemson 30, Notre Dame 3. LSU 63, Oklahoma 28. Those were playoff semifinals. Not first round, 12 teams. The bottom 8 of those 12 are playing semifinals where blowouts were occurring. I remember Clemson beating the brakes off of Alabama. But no. Nope. The mighty SEC, man, they're so good. Oh my gosh. We are headed, we're headed for the inevitable. The SEC just doing its own thing. Be my guest. The day will come where that whole deal crumbles. It just falls apart. Glass house. Talk about a glass house. That's one of them. And the walls are damn thin. Coming up, Arizona State has a leg up on Texas. I'm just not as worried as I thought I would be looking at the metrics. This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is where I went yesterday and said, you know what? Considering that a good majority of the college football playoff semifinals in the past were blowouts, I think they might be blowouts again, and they were. So I took a bunch of these favorites and give me all the points in the absolute world. So I did. 9 points for Penn State. Absolutely. Sign me up. And I won money from FanDuel. Bet $5 right now. Get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL and college football all in one place. Check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play. So much more on the same page where you place those bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more and do it with FanDuel. It is America's #1 sportsbook and an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Arizona State is not scared of Texas. And they shouldn't be. the response out of Arizona State fans who are rightfully ticked off. This is an 11.5. No, it's 13.5 now. Point spread to open, and it will grow. This will grow to 15. It'll grow to 16, something along those lines. Against a Texas team that couldn't put away Vanderbilt, against a Texas team that couldn't put away Clemson, who's been shoddy at best all season long, who should have lost to Pitt, who almost lost to SMU, took a walk-off miracle field goal to beat them. And that's the Texas team we want to be scared of. The school that can't seem to put teams away. The school that can't seem to win the big one this year. The only big one they did win was still a school in Clemson outside of the top 15 in the country. Texas has yet to log a top 15. Well, Clemson's number 12. No, they're not. The College Football Playoff Committee had to put them at 12. And the only reason they had to put them at 12 is because of the stupid rule that says that every conference champion has to get in, and you rank them 1 through 5, and the fifth place team gets usually the 12th seed. That's why Clemson is there. This is the same Longhorns team. The same Longhorns team that struggled to get off the ground against Mississippi State. The same Texas team that got doubled up at home in their biggest game of the season against Georgia, 30-15. And then when they played Georgia for the second time and Georgia's starting quarterback, who is a preseason Heisman candidate, went out, guess what Texas did? They lost. Like, buddy, we're going to take out their starting quarterback while you're squarely in this game. They may have had a lead at that point. Come on, Texas. We're giving you a real shot here, bud. And you couldn't do it. What about the rest of that schedule? If you're an Arizona State fan, you're thinking, Texas is daunting. One of the top 5 teams in the country. They were number 1 earlier this season. Gosh, I don't know if we can do this. They beat Colorado State, 7-5. UTSA, 7-5. Michigan, 7-5. Any ranked teams yet? UL Monroe missed a bowl game. Mississippi State 2-10. Oklahoma 6-6. Like that's the first half of their resume. Then the first real opponent they see, 30-15, they get boat raced at home in Austin at DKR. Surely they'll respond against Vanderbilt, right? 27-24. And I know you're thinking, wait a second, they're an SEC team, and so far I've only seen one ranked game. Yeah, it's because their non-conference was against cupcakes. Michigan this year was a cupcake. Ask Indiana, who beat the absolute tar out of them. Okay, well, after the Vanderbilt game, surely Texas picked it up. They beat Florida at home. Yeah, Florida, not very, 7-5, actually. Arkansas on the road. Yeah, 20-10. Real slugfest, tough win for the Longhorns. Barn burner. Surely Arkansas was good, right? 6-6. What about Kentucky, who they beat? Yeah, 31-14. Beat the brakes off them. Yeah, that Kentucky team missed a bowl game. Texas A&M. How about that game? 17-7. They beat A&M. Only scored 17 points against an 8-4 Texas A&M team. And if we're drum roll plays tallied up, how many ranked teams did they beat? 1. 12 games in the SEC this season. How many ranked teams did Texas beat? 1. Well, Vanderbilt was ranked at the time they beat No. That's not how that works. You don't get to say that Michigan was the number 10 team in the country because you know as well as I know that Michigan's not the number 10 team in the country. So when Texas won that game, that 10, come to find out, didn't mean anything. It was just a Helvetica font next to a team's name. 2 numbers sandwiched together. A Fugazi as your director of culture, your minister of culture, Matthew McConaughey would say. Also, does that guy think he's on the team? Does he just think he's like... Do you think he's a coach? What is he doing? Then in the Clemson game, they're facing a Tigers team that was middle of the pack this season. Didn't have a good year again. Killed by Georgia. 34-3 against Georgia. 38-24 against Texas. Right? And it's the same Georgia team that got beat badly by Ole Miss. And I've told you before, transitive property doesn't work in college football. We can't say, oh, you beat this guy, so you must be able to beat this guy. They must be better than you. We can't exactly do that. But here I want to prove Clemson isn't a very strong football team. 33-21, they lost at home to a bad Louisville team. Killed by Georgia, lost to Louisville, should have lost to Pitt, took a last-minute touchdown to rally against Pitt, a miracle touchdown to rally against Pitt, then lost to South Carolina at home in a game they were up late and had a complete crap-the-bed fall apart. Other games they won, App State, bad, fired their coach. NC State, bad. Stanford, terrible at football. Florida State, another one of their wins. 2-10. Wake Forest, another one of their wins on the road. That Wake Forest team fired their coach. Virginia, are they good? No. How about Citadel? The Citadel, Clemson got late in the season, and their walk-off field goal against SMU. And we just saw what SMU did against Penn State. So you're going to tell me that Texas is this big, scary team? Because the only team they beat who was ranked this season was ranked 16th, the Clemson Tigers. And that team they beat wasn't very good at the sport of football. And that's who I'm supposed to be scared of, huh? And there's some Texans say, oh, he's just a mad Big 12 guy. He left the Big 12 and he's upset. You won the conference one time in the last 14 years. The Baylor Bears. The Baylor Bears. The TCU Horned Frogs. Those schools have more Big 12 titles in football than you in the last 15 years. But you're the big bad boss that we miss. You're about to face the 16th best rushing defense in the country, 23rd best passing defense, and your quarterback seems to have a tendency to throw it to the opposing team more than he can throw it to his own guys. You're about to face the number 12 rushing attack in the country. You're going to face number 15 passing attack in the country. Arizona State has a chip on its shoulder. Arizona State deserves a chip on its shoulder. That is this matchup. That is for Texas, something you don't want to get into. Clemson, oh, we're happy to be there, man. Up top. God's name, image, and likeness, which is cool. But this is a Clemson team that hasn't been able to figure it out. They don't have momentum. They're the Make-A-Wish kid. Oh, cool. We got invited because the system lets in the worst conference champion. Nice up top, guys. Then you still couldn't put them away. And this Arizona State team is hungry, out for absolute blood. And Kenny Dillingham, I just told you the metrics, has a team that could very well put Texas in its place when they square off. And likely, in my mind, will do that very thing. Cam Skattebo is the... You ready for this? Can I tell you something? Can I say something that's going to be controversial to some of you, but it's the truth. It's just the truth. Cam Skattebo is the best running back that Texas has faced all season long. I don't know if Texas can guard Cam Skattebo because I haven't seen them guard a player that's in the same stratosphere as Cam Skattebo this season. Donovan Edwards, who? We got to the end of the year, we're looking around going, that guy's on the cover of the football game? I'm just not worried, man. I'm not that worried about this Texas team. If I'm Kenny Dillingham, I'm going, sweet. Much rather play Texas than Georgia, as been proven by how that head-to-head matchup went. Coming up, complete college football playoff bracket update. This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is where I go for daily fantasy, and Prize Picks is the best place to do it. It's available in over 30 states. Georgia, California, Texas are all included in that as well. It is the best place to get real money sports action. Win up to 1,000 times your cash when you pick more or less on at least two players for that shot to win 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long with Prize Picks. They have a flex play. Means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. They put their members first. All withdrawals are very fast, and MasterCard is now offered for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. So sign up today, get $50 instantly when you play $5. Download the app, use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today. Prize Picks, use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Visit Prize Picks and do it today. The college football playoff did not offer a lot to love on its very first day. Its inception is one that people are already complaining about, but I seem to, and as we get into the entire bracket rundown, I seem to remember a time when playoff games were not competitive. 44-16, Clemson beats Alabama in 2019. How about some of the other classic games we've seen across college football where, Kirk Herbstreit wants you to know that Indiana shouldn't have been in because these games are always much tighter, and there's no way to, here's that Pat Ford tweet. Old enough to remember Oregon 59, Florida State 20, Alabama 38, Michigan State 0, Clemson 31, Ohio State 0, Clemson 30, Notre Dame 3, LSU 63, Oklahoma 28. Those were playoff, as he mentions, semifinals. Brand names: Florida State, Michigan State, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Oklahoma. Brand names, not first round, but semifinal. Compared to today, where it's those 8 teams squaring off, this was the Final Four. Brand name semifinals killed. Don't act like this is the first time we've seen playoff blowouts. What we saw, to me, is something where you have, this was put really well by somebody on Twitter, I wish I could remember the account. You have teams that are playing at home who get 3 weeks to prepare to play at home against an opponent they can scout entirely. This isn't turn around 1 week later NFL style. We are going to have our own home field, our own crowd behind us, and time to prepare to bring you into our house. There's a big leg up when you get that. And Stuart Mandel posts the first 2 games of last year's NFL playoffs, final score 45-14 and 26-7, where there is no committee picking the field. Sometimes you would think college football is the only sport with postseason blowouts. This happens all the time. How about March Madness? We talk about that. When a 12-seeded team beats a 5-seed, we're all like, yeah, basketball parity, woo! But here, when there's some sort of blowout or some sort of when a 5-seed beats a 12-seed or a 3-seed beats a whatever, it's not like cool parity or cool, let's appreciate excellence. It's, I wonder who else should have been that 12-seed. I wonder who else should have been that 13-seed. It's so backwards in how we have it. I don't think you should have watched yesterday and had that takeaway with how the college football playoff started. And Kirk Herbstreit began this on game day by saying Indiana was outclassed. It was not a team that should have been on that field when you consider other teams that could have been there. What? He continues, but because by golly, they've got 11 wins, that's a bunch of BS. On 3 to rivals, to ESPN, to everybody that wants you to think the SEC is top-notch. They really weren't top-notch. Tennessee displayed that. Texas couldn't put Clemson away. And we continue to play this hypothetical story of, well, Indiana, they got blown out, which they did, and they lost by 10. Indiana got blown out, and had it been Alabama, it would have been much different. Well, Alabama shouldn't have lost to 6-6 Oklahoma or 6-6 Vanderbilt. Sorry. Win the games ahead of you. In a playoff system, an 11-1 team deserves a chance to go to the playoffs. Cyclone Larry posts, Sankey, I won't use that word, but people who watch Sankey fornicate are going to point at these games and say it's why we should get rid of auto bids, give more spots to the SEC and the Big Ten. The point was never for the SMUs and the ASUs of the world to win in year one. It's for them to be able to build off these playoff appearances, eventually grow contenders from 4 to 5 teams to 15 to 20 teams per year. They aren't scared about Alabama being left out again. They're scared because the transfer portal, NIL, and expanded playoff are crushing the talent monopoly. I do believe that's the case as you see transfer portal players that are exiting their SEC or Big Ten schools and coming to the Big 12 to compete. So those are some of the big takeaways that I wrote down from the day. Hey, we're going to give it a second. Some schools are still adjusting to the new playoff format in what's becoming a more competitive college football. And blowouts have always been a thing in the college football playoff. This is not like John Kurtz, who's another really solid Big 12 analyst, says it's unbearable on Twitter. This sport is broken in so many ways, and it's clear the SEC Mafia will complain its way straight to a Super League or its own playoff sooner rather than later. It goes against everything that makes the sport great, will ruin it over time, but it is inevitable. Really dark day in college football from that standpoint, and now we have 8. After blowouts to blowouts to blowout, and the only one that you're like, okay, they kind of competed. I guess Texas and Clemson and Indiana and Notre Dame are kind of in that same boat of end of the game. You're like, that was a blowout. Not really. Couldn't completely put them away. Texas 38, Clemson 24. The Longhorns move on to play Arizona State. That's the 5 seed and the 4 seed at noon Eastern in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. Texas, a 13.5-point favorite. That one is on New Year's Day. Oregon will also play on New Year's Day against Ohio State. We get a rematch of that game, which was a dandy, a classic in the regular season. Oregon winning at home. Ohio State and Ryan Day have a shot to finally prove that he can win the big one. If you want to consider that Tennessee game the big one, then sure, him and James Franklin both got over the hump this weekend, but they will be on January 1st matching up with the Ducks again at 4 o'clock Eastern in the Rose Bowl. Oregon, Ohio State, just a classic Rose Bowl matchup for those two schools. Number 1 versus number 8. Again, the same Ohio State team that takes Oregon to the wire, but also lost to Michigan a couple weeks ago and then follows that up by killing Tennessee. Then, following an SMU loss to Penn State 38-10, where also regional airport stories were breaking yesterday that SMU donors, and I don't love SMU. I was a Baylor guy, so I've never been a huge Ponies fan. Rooting for them against Penn State, rooting for chaos. Always good to root for the underdog, unless you're an SEC fan. For some reason, they hate that. And the airport at Penn State wasn't big enough there in Happy Valley. They had to reroute a lot of the planes, so I think it was Williamsport. So the biggest donors at SMU had to get off a plane at an airport that wasn't really that close to Penn State and be party bussed to the stadium. They were an hour late. They got there an hour after kickoff. That is brutal. And then by the time they get there, it's already not a game. 38-10 final. Domination at the line of scrimmage. Never really a point in this game to me where you thought, SMU can find their way back. SMU can hang around. Jennings at quarterback was just allergic to throwing to his own guys and loved giving the ball to Penn State. Those pick sixes were electric. I think this was the one game that I circled for the weekend that I really thought, because it was at noon too, and they still had the whiteout, the energy, the crowd noise, that level shows what the new era of college football is going to look like with on-campus playoff games. Really, really like that touch. I like that we get to bring the top end of college football to a home stadium, and now they get Boise State. Ashton Genty against Drew Aller. This is the New Year's Eve game, 6:30 Eastern kickoff. Penn State is favored by 10. Based on what we know to this point, a lot of these games are blowouts. Georgia's only favored by 1.5. I would take Georgia all day long. You're telling me that NIU can beat Notre Dame and Georgia can't? Penn State by 10. I think Penn State is just a much better team than Boise State and should go to the national semifinal. That's the VRBO Fiesta Bowl. So Boise State is going to play much closer than Penn State will. The Nittany Lions going across the country to play in Phoenix. But after the way they beat SMU, now you get 10 days rest and you play Boise State. You're salivating. You're chomping at the bit. I'm rooting for Boise State because that's, chaos and the fun little man. Penn State should rout that game. Then there was Indiana and Notre Dame. Our first taste of what this whole deal is. Just cool. Again, to see those campus games, 27-17, the final score there. Notre Dame and Georgia meet in the All-State Sugar Bowl. It is the nightcap, 7:45 Eastern on New Year's Day. Georgia favored by 1.5 in what to me is likely a dog's win by much more than 1.5. Like Georgia in this matchup, I do believe it becomes Georgia, Penn State. Then we see probably still Oregon. We can't bet against them. And I told you earlier, I love Arizona State right now because the way they're playing it. I believe they cover 13.5. And I think if there's going to be an upset, if there was going to be an upset here, it is Arizona State over Texas. Give me the Devils. Forks up. Yeah. Heck yeah. And this is just good. Whether you like the blowout aspect yesterday or not, we've seen blowouts in the NFL and college football since the beginning of time. But the fact that everybody's got a shot, everybody gets a chance, awesome to me. Come back the rest of this week. We'll be covering it. Have a happy holidays and Merry Christmas, folks, too. We will have a ton of coverage despite the holiday season because you need somebody to talk about sports for you, right? This has been and always will be Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.